Okay, my name is Maurice Harker. I am the Director of Life-Changing Services, which is the home of several programs. Our main program, our Keystone program, Sons of Helaman, has been around for over 10 years now. Many of you are familiar with that name, even perhaps more so than Life-Changing Services. After a few years, about 3 or 4 years, the Men of Moroni program was created and developed so that we could be of service to adult men. And then, following that, we created the Worth Group. The Worth Group is for women who have been traumatized, women who've experienced sexual betrayal by their spouses, and their need for recovery from that experience. The need for young women to be served. The Daughters of Light program was created for young women who have sexual addiction issues. But still, we found that we were inadequate in the services that we were providing for people who were in a great deal of pain in other ways. Now, some might say that women dealing with sexual addiction or sexual issues is a new thing, but it's being brought to our attention more and more and more, but that this is not a new thing. And for the life of me, I've worked really, really hard to become very skilled at knowing how to work with people and their needs, but there are some things that I'm just not the best specialist on, notwithstanding my efforts. I'm going to introduce you to Mindy Lundgreen. I met her about 8 years ago, maybe as many as 10 years ago, and she has been a phenomenally dedicated woman and clinician in an effort to serve women with these issues, specializing over the years and fine-tuning her ability to serve those who are youth and adults struggling with such things. I've had many consultations with her as I've tried to learn how to work with my own clientele, dealing with the differences between the teenage boys and the adult men, and the teenage girls and the adult women, and what it's like for them, and you can't use the same techniques, methods, or mentality. While there are commonalities, there are plenty of differences that have to be addressed. Now, one of the most important things that we found is when you don't have a bit of an education on how to have these conversations with the young women or the adult women, you can really start off on the wrong foot, and it can really be a painful experience. And so many of you, if I thought of myself as an ecclesiastical leader, which we hope that many who attend today are ecclesiastical leaders, interviewing a young woman or an adult woman on these issues can be a delicate balance. Please, as Mindy addresses these issues, let this become an interactive conversation. Let this become something where you're going, let's play the what about game. Well, what if it's like this, and what if it's like that, and what if the parents, or what if I'm scared, and what if all these things. There's so many different pieces to the puzzle that we need to make sure that get addressed. So please do not be shy about asking your questions. She's going to try to be thorough, and it's pretty no holds barred too, okay? Let's not be too tiptoey around these issues. As you listen to Mindy talk, you're going to see that she's not scared of talking about hard things. Okay? She has worked very hard to make sure that what she is going to provide you with today is not only based on extremely accurate scientific principles, but the work she's put into making sure that what she teaches is inspired and divinely led. You're going to find that she can easily blend those two worlds together, the world of spiritual concepts and the world of scientific concepts. And so please don't be shy about asking your questions, and we'll cover the things that are important to you. All right, this is Mindy Lundgreen.
Thank you, Maurice. It's such an honor to work with Maurice at Life-Changing Services and to have a common goal and value. At Life-Changing Services, we say that we fight together and we fight against Satan, and we are just hoping that we can bring peace into the lives of those who get caught in some of his traps. So I'm used to talking to one person in a room. I'm not used to being in front of a camera, so if I act like a weirdo, it's probably because I feel weird right now doing this, and if I get emotional, Therapists sometimes do that, and I'm going to be talking about clients and experiences that are actually close to my heart and things that I keep close in my heart because they are confidential. The things that I share and discuss with you today, stories I share, I have permission to share with you, and I want you to know that and recognize that. As this was organized firstly as a meeting for bishops, I want to address that, and I also want to acknowledge that there are parents and there are women and there are other people than bishops here, because we need to talk about female sexual misconduct and misbehavior, and it's something that's been in the dark and it's been festering just like a disease festers when it is kept in the dark and when it's kept inside. And I want to bring it out into the light, and today I'm so grateful for the opportunity to bring it into the light and bring it to you, and hopefully it can find a place of healing. When we bring things out of the dark and into the light, it can begin to heal. I want to empathize with bishops today at this moment, and I want to empathize with what it must be like for you to sit with a young woman or a woman who is dealing with sexual misbehavior and having to have that conversation with her and to talk to her about intimate things that as a man you've been taught that you don't talk about those things with a woman whom you respect. I try to understand and wrap my brain around the position that it puts you in and some of the discomfort that is there. And I'm hoping that the things that I share with you today might be helpful in this journey, because you've been called to do this, and I know you have the power to do it, and I know that the women in your ward and the women who you are associated with need your help. You are their bridge between recovery and Christ and getting back to their Heavenly Father. They need you. They need to have the hard conversation with you. And as uncomfortable as you feel, I can promise you, I can guarantee you that that woman exponentially feels more uncomfortable than you do in that moment. So just know that and keep that in the back of your mind when the hard conversations need to begin. I want to, at this time too, empathize with the woman and share with you her shame and her discontent with herself and the level of courage that it has taken for her to find herself at your door, in your office, and ready to open her mouth and to share. It is a huge, courageous, and to me, a heroic act for women to be able to stand up and go in and talk about something that at one point in our history would have caused them to be stoned. I think what I'd like to do is I'd like to begin with a woman's journey and share her story with you. And I'm just going to read that. Unfortunately, I don't have a podium, so I'm going to be going back and forth a little bit here. And I just want to help you understand where this woman is coming from. I asked some of my prior clients to share with me their experiences with working with bishops, their experience with sexual addiction, and they really shared some beautiful things. As I asked this woman, she said, "Without knowing it, I have been waiting for this opportunity for 3 years. A chance to make sense of something essentially senseless. Please start by impressing upon them that these thoughts I'm sharing are in no way to minimize what I've done or excuse my behavior in any way. They are simply my thoughts and my feelings. The first myth I'd like to dispel is that sexual addiction is almost nothing to do with sex. When I first confessed to my bishop, it seemed all he saw was a sexually promiscuous woman, indulging herself in evil. He made it all about the sex and the sinful sexual gratification I received in disregarding God's law. He began to list all of the blessings and promises I was not worthy of, and focused on the degrading behavior I had engaged in and the shameful way I had defiled my temple, my body. I came asking for mercy, and he gave me only punishment. I was fully aware of the seriousness of my sin. I knew exactly how far into the darkness I had gone. I was living there. That night, I felt as if his main concern was for the broken law and not for the one who had broke it. I respect God's law as well, and there would be a year ahead of me to reflect upon that. But in that moment, I needed love and a place to set my burden down. I was not the focus of that night. Sexual sin was the focus, and it was the sin we talked about. We didn't talk about me. I had indeed disregarded God's law, but not for sexual gratification, for an unmet need that had become so large that I had lost myself to it. A need for my pain to be seen and validated by those I loved, and those who were judges in Israel over me. I had long ago cut myself off from God. Now I needed my husband and my church leaders to see it. To witness my brokenness and sense my despair, the behavior I chose was horrific because it dissolved a covenant I had made with God. I was alone in an abusive relationship, unable to feel Christ's love, and in so much emotional pain. I wanted help, but I didn't think I was worthy of it. So I did the most unthinkable behavior my unconscious mind could grasp onto. I went to the internet, and I had sex with 3 men I met there. It's a horror so reprehensible that even today I hold my breath when I think of it. Please, bishops, focus on the sinner, not the sin. Believe me, she is well enough aware of the sin. She feels that is all she is. She's lost her identity to it. She's not a sinner, but she's become the sin. Help her distinguish between the two, while maintaining an awareness of the seriousness of her sin. I believe there is a merciful balance between the two. Sexual addiction has a biological component that cannot be ignored. Some of us have brains that are pre-wired for addiction. It's a delicate balance between nature and nurture, brain chemistry, and behavior modification. Please recognize her struggle with both. Behavior is always a choice, but with the deck stacked against her, choosing appropriate behavior takes a lot of strength. She must always be held accountable for her choices, but a little compassion can make the battle much more winnable. When her chemicals are up, she has learned to be hypervigilant about her behavior. She's only learned this from not being vigilant in the past. Her experience, as sinful as it may be, has helped her to become stronger than her biology. She truly believes that Christ has walked the path of addiction with her. Otherwise, how could she know it so well? Or how could he know it so well? She has failed many times on her journey to small success. She has learned very well how to rate her arousal on a scale from 1 to 10, and we will talk about that. If all of you are not aware of that, I will help you understand what she's talking about. Only through experiencing the results of 10 has she learned to stop at 4. Please don't shame her for that learning curve. She's walking a slippery slope, and she does it well now. Please, bishops, see her behavior at 4 and forgive the 10s. They are not part of her anymore. Robes crimson as blood can become white, someone once said. As an LDS woman, she has had limited information available to her about sexuality and how it works with her mind, body, and spirit. She doesn't understand it like the professionals do. In this area, you and she may be in the same boat. Don't be afraid of her questions, and together try to find a place of safety, free from shame and embarrassment. She needs your guidance. It's still all quite a mystery, but she knows the difference between right and wrong. Trust her with those decisions. From being untrustworthy, she has become someone who can trust herself. Focus on that, not the mistake of the past. Remember that repentance is a process. and she is more than the worst thing she has ever done. Above all, love her in a Christ-like way and respect her. She is turning to you for haven in a stormy world. Shame is the last thing you should offer her. Talk about the things she is worthy of: prayer, scripture study, words of the prophets, journals of her journey. 17 minutes of deep thought about her relationship with Christ each Sunday. She lets the sacrament pass her by. That's enough sadness for one day. She knows what she's done. She knows where she stands with God. He loves her, and she loves him. Bishops, I thought this was beautiful. This is not my words at all. This is from a woman who has gone through the process and who has experienced some of the deepest shame that I've ever known. She knows what's wrong. She needs a bishop's loving arms around her, even though I know bishops can't officially give hugs. She needs to feel that her bishop loves her. She knows what she's done. Women understand how dark and how deep they are swimming when they are misbehaving sexually. And this does not only apply to women, this applies to the young women. And I'm going to read some things from them too, and some of their experiences with bishops. Bishops, I want you to know that you are doing a phenomenal job. Many of you are just getting it absolutely right, and I work with those women and young women too, and I thank you for that, and they thank you for that, and their recovery is so much easier. When someone is bound in the depths of shame, it is hard to function. It's hard to use the skills that I'm teaching them in counseling because they don't feel worthy to even utilize the skills. So I'd like to ask the question, and probably I don't know if I can get responses. I do have a few people in the room. What is the difference between guilt and shame? What's the fundamental differences between guilt and shame? Yes.
Guilt essentially says, I did something bad, and shame says, you are bad.
Perfect, thank you. That sounds like a mom who really knows. Guilt is when we have recognized our behavior, and we recognize the behavior as being bad. Shame comes across as, I am a bad person. I'm inherently wrong. I'm bad. There's no hope for me. Guilt is, I abhor the behavior and I can change that behavior. And I am a daughter of God, and I have the strength inside of me to overcome it. Shame is, I'm terrible. God doesn't love me. There's no hope for me. When a person is in that space of shame, and they think that they're inherently evil, and they're the only one on the planet who's had a sexual feeling that was inappropriate, they are unwilling to come forward to talk about what's going on for them and to get the help that they so need and desire. So breaking the bonds of shame is the first step in helping a woman to come forward with a sexual misbehavior or any kind of misconduct. What is sexual misbehavior or misconduct? Should we just kind of get a little open and talk about that and how we can talk about that? And how do you have these conversations with these women? And then we're going to get more into the whole addictive cycle and how it all works. So a sexual misbehavior is when we are sexually acting outside of our value system. And LDS women know what that value system is. I feel that they know. Just like the woman in the letter mentioned, she was raised LDS, so she knew the value system, but the value system was extremely tight, like we don't even talk about it type of a value system. So we need to kind of break out of that part. If we don't talk about it, how can we possibly work through it? So although it's so uncomfortable to talk about sexual things, this is something we need to absolutely talk about and find the way to do it. Why do we feel ashamed when we talk about sex? And if you do feel ashamed, I want you to ask yourself why. It's a beautiful gift that God has given us. It is a celebration of love within a relationship. It is the closest way that we become godlike, because we can create people. God created people. He created the first human being. And He gave us the ability to create people. Sex is cool. And that's what it gives us the ability to do, amongst other things. They have to do with bonding and nurturing relationships. It's a beautiful thing. It's not something that Heavenly Father wants us to be ashamed of. Shame comes from Satan. Shame is not a godly feeling at all. And if there are feelings of shame going on, we need to step outside of that. Because when we are in shame, I don't think we're in our value system. Because we're hanging out with Satan. Okay? So stepping outside of the shame. Is that comfortable? Is that going to be comfortable? Oh, I think I'll step outside of my embarrassment, shame of talking about sex. No. So I'm asking you today to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I can tell you, if you will do that, the Spirit will step inside and it will help you. And as bishops, I know your mouths will be open and you will be able to speak. But you might be uncomfortable. What's this thing that we always have to be comfortable? If it's right, it's comfortable. Not always true. This is going to be uncomfortable. Okay? So I encourage, I was speaking to one bishop, and as I was talking to him, I'm like, why don't you role play it with your wife? Just role play the conversation, because it's got to feel really weird talking to, maybe a 13-year-old about a sexual misbehavior, because that happens. And that's got to feel kind of weird. So almost you might need to practice it a little bit. If you are uncomfortable, the woman's going to sense that you're uncomfortable, and then she's going to go inward. Oh my goodness, he can't handle it. This is the first time he's ever heard a woman or a young woman talk about inappropriate sexual misbehavior. Okay? Because she feels alone. She feels like she's the only person in the whole world who has ever dealt with that. Every woman I talk to tells me, I don't think any other women feel this way. Have you ever had another client? Have you ever had another female client who masturbates? I've had clients ask me that, as though she's the only person in the whole wide world, like she discovered masturbation all on her own. It feels that way. It's so isolating. So getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, practicing, role-playing, maybe having a set of questions that you're going to use that you're comfortable with to lead into these conversations might be really healthy. And I have some ideas of questions that you can use, and I'm going to share those with you. So I find it interesting. I was talking to another bishop, and he told me, every young man who comes through my office, I ask him, have you had any problems with pornography? Have you had any problems with masturbation? And I said, well, what about the girls? Have you asked them? No? Well, why not? I don't know. Well, I need you to ask this girl in your ward right now. Okay, because there's a struggle there. Okay, well, how do you suggest I do that? Okay, and I want to talk to you about that. Because as much as every guy is having a problem with pornography, they say every man has been exposed to pornography by the age of 12. Girls and women have been exposed to it too. To think that it does not have an impact is a myth. It's a myth, and Satan knows it's a myth. And he hopes that we'll keep pretending like girls don't have sexual feelings, because then it will never get addressed. And then it will stay in the dark, and these girls will continue to flounder and to struggle because we don't believe it's really going on. Okay? So here are some ideas. First of all, I'd like to make the suggestion in the wards, if you are having these conversations with your youth, that you are having a meeting, maybe a fifth Sunday, where you are talking to the parents and saying, hey parents, I just want to let you know, I've been educated, and I feel it's important that I ask every young adult, every teenager who's in my office about sexual misconduct. And here's my plan of how I'd like to talk to the kids about it. And as parents, if you have concerns, I'd like for you to come and talk to me about it. And so parents have a heads up what you're going to say. They can open that conversation with their children. They can prepare their children for the conversation if they feel the need. If parents don't want you to have that conversation with the child, then they are put in a position where they can let you know, Bishop, I'm not okay with that. So sometimes it gets concerning, well, I don't want to say too much. So I think it's important that you let your ward members know that you're having the conversation. So here's some language that you could potentially use. And you're talking to a young woman, right? Or to a young single adult woman, or even to a woman. Now, I need to ask you about sexual behaviors. Not because I think it's a problem for you, but because I want to give every youth in the ward the opportunity to be free from this misery if it has accidentally entered your life. Okay, so you're kindly opening that door that sometimes it accidentally enters your life. We know it's not an accident. Satan puts it there for those kids. And that's another way you can say, if Satan has brought this into your life, I just want to double check and make sure you're okay with it. This is the most important part if you're talking to a girl. I truly care about you. I'm not embarrassed to talk about this, even though it might feel really uncomfortable for us both. Okay, so acknowledge that. This is going on. I'm not going to act like this is super great for me as a bishop, that I am just so comfortable having this conversation. I can acknowledge that maybe we're both uncomfortable. And then she'll be like, oh, okay, the bishop gets it. We're both a little uncomfortable, but it's okay. He said he's okay. Let her know that you understand sexual stuff. And when you're talking to a youth, sometimes just using words like stuff instead of the big scientific terms might help them to feel more comfortable, is everywhere, and it's really difficult for it not to impact your life. Sometimes it feels so uncomfortable to talk to your bishop about this, but I want you to know that I'm here for you and I'm okay talking about this stuff. And then bishop, just fake it, just fake it, get loose, just kind of fake it. I'm okay talking about this stuff. Okay, do your best, because it could feel really uncomfortable. And then you can ask, are you having any problems with sexual stuff, like reading sexually explicit or enticing material? Guess what? Girls don't super like to look at pictures of boys who are in modest or scantily clad men. Girls don't like that stuff. They are reading it, okay? They may be watching movies. When was the last time you saw a sexually explicit TV show or movie? I don't want you to ask her, have you seen a sexually explicit TV show or movie? If she's 13 years old, she's seen something sexually explicit. So when was the last time? How did that impact you? Okay.
Will you address later on, like you said, that we're asking them when they've seen it accidentally?
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't seem like we're holding them responsible for what they're responsible for. I mean, isn't that giving them a scapegoat there? Are you going to talk about that later, or is that something to talk about now?
Yeah, well, we do the accidentally because I want to acknowledge the discomfort. And the reason why I want you to start with accidentally is to open the door. You're right. Because it feels to a woman, oh, I cannot even express the shame to say, I sought out sexual material. There is something so inherently bad inside of a woman. But if you accidentally kind of saw it, and then we can begin to talk about, well, really, how accidentally was it? And then she can start to get more real. So I'm asking you to walk on very thin ice as you approach the topic. Does that make sense?
So you will increase the sensation of responsibility as you go?
Yes, absolutely. And that's when you start saying when. And we're doing the when. Yes, Bishop?
So you'll probably get to this, but I was pretty blunt once. I just asked straight out.
Very good.
Masturbation is wrong. She didn't want, as a young woman, she didn't know what masturbation meant. And so it became very awkward for me trying to, I came just short of drawing a picture because I was trying to explain it.
Right, right.
And she wasn't getting it. I think she might have got it, but I think she was thinking, man, this guy's really weird.
Okay.
So how do you?
That's next.
Okay.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Bishop. I am so grateful. So after you ask about how does it impact you? Has Satan tempted you to engage in self-stimulating activities? Okay, because that, we call it Miss M with my teenagers, because that word masturbation is a mouthful, and sometimes they have a hard time with it, they don't know what it means. Has Satan tempted you to engage in self-stimulating activities? If you don't want to say Satan, you can say, have you engaged in that? But I'm here to say that Satan tempts them to do it, and I want the girls to know that Satan is messing with them. That they are not bad, they are not terrible. Satan's been working on them, and that there is responsibility there with him too, and learning how to fight him. Okay, so have you engaged in self-stimulating activities? Do you know what I mean by that? So there's a scary question. Do you know what I mean by that? The answer to that question is touching private parts other than for cleanliness purposes. Okay, is this a problem for you right now? And also, after you ask that for other than cleanliness purposes, you can say that another word for that is called masturbation. And that's why I want you talking to your parents. If you're speaking to the youth, I want you talking to your parents, so the parents are having these conversations with the kids. I'm telling you, there's parents in your ward who are not going to be able to have that conversation. They'll be, oh, thank heavens, the bishop is going to teach my child about that, because it's really scary. So but we want to let parents know that you're going to have that conversation. Ask her, is this a problem for you right now? And if they say, not really, then you're going to say, oh, okay, when was the last time that this happened? Okay? Because if they're not definite about it, when was the last time this happened? Are you having any sexual contact with friends, boyfriends, or girlfriends? Okay? Let's not be naive in this world today that girls are not having problems with other girls and getting caught up in the Hollywood of same-gender attraction and the things that are going on there. Let's not be naive. We have to ask the question. We have to ask it. And friends, if we say boyfriends, unfortunately it's been brought to my attention that kids are having recreational sexual experiences with their friends. That's something that they do as friends and in groups of friends. So I'm asking the bishop to be extremely wise and knowledgeable, recognize that it's going on, never say in your mind, this person would never do that. Give her the opportunity to come clean before judging that this person would never do that. Because I don't think at my age that I can understand exactly how difficult it is. I don't think that I can understand the journey of a girl at the same high school that I attended. Things have changed, and it's really common for girls to experiment. And it's really common for groups of girls and for groups of boys and girls as experimentation, recreational. And after you ask, are you having sexual contact with any friends or boyfriends? What I mean by that, are you allowing others to touch, or are you touching the privates of others? Okay? And everyone knows what a private is, usually by the time they are in first grade. I want to say, and if they don't, then you're a parent, they need to know what a private is.
Mindy, would you address sexting at this point? Using their cell phones and inappropriate texts and pictures, that type of thing?
Definitely, definitely. And I did not write that down, and thank you for bringing that up. That's a critical thing that's going on, is sexting. I recently learned that Do You Want to Get Down has a different meaning than what I thought. Because, you know, You Want to Get Down was dancing when I was growing up.
That's right.
So if kids are texting those things, and I have to tell you, these young women feel they cannot be accepted by boys unless they'll engage in some of that activity. They feel that if they will not put themselves out there, that they're not going to get a date to the prom. And trying to teach girls that the prom isn't that big of a deal. When I know how I felt about my senior prom. Trying to teach a girl, it's not worth it. It's just not okay. And to teach a girl that you can leave all your friends now and you can be all alone because you're not going to sext anymore, you're not going to talk about that stuff. And for her to say, who am I supposed to sit with at lunch? What am I going to do? And to have that desperation for her. Recognize the loneliness that is there and walking away from every friend you have because you won't engage in this activity. Okay?
Is there a difference between sexting and what's going on in the girl's head when she sends pictures?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we understand the girls are like very anxious about sending pictures of themselves privately, but they do it anyway. Is now the time to talk about something like that?
Yeah. Once again, it's the need to be accepted. I want to be loved. I cannot tell you, and this is not just for the young women. This is for women too, who have been pressured over and over. Just send me a picture. Just send me a picture in your bra. Just send me a picture. Just unzip your jacket a little bit. Just send me a picture. And how that works, where they break them down. Just unzip your jacket a little bit. Unzip it all the way. And that it is piecemeal and it's small steps down that path to sending nude pictures and things that are extremely inappropriate. What's going on is that that girl wants to be accepted in most cases. There are the cases where I call it using your inappropriate woman power, and that's your sensuality and your sexuality, and that needs to be acknowledged that women are very powerful. And their sensuality is very powerful with men. And sometimes girls access that and they recognize how they can use it and the attention they can get from it and the control and power they have with it. And if a girl is caught in it that way, she needs help just as bad as the other one, right? And she needs to understand the impact she is having on males and how that is hurting her and damaging her self-esteem, okay? So there are those two reasons that it's going on. Girls are inherently nurturing. Girls inherently want to nurture men. We're kind of born that way. We want to nurture men and take care of you, and it brings some joy and some satisfaction, and we want to nurture children, and we're nurturers. And so when that comes across as nurturing, I'm nurturing him. He'll feel really bad if I don't send this to him. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. He will feel so bad. And helping a young woman to understand how to appropriately nurture a man and a young man, and to use her celestial orientation in a way to lift instead of degrade, is a critical lesson to learn. Now, I'm not sure if I answered that question.
Good enough for now.
Okay, is there a sub-question to the question?
Not yet.
Okay, very good. Are there any other questions? I want to know, are there any questions online before I start jumping?
You mentioned about informing the parents that you want to be able to talk to the girls about sexual things. We have some parents that are like, thank you, and other parents that are like, don't you dare talk to my daughter about sexual things. So what would you recommend for a bishop when he's got that big range of possibility? How does he work himself through that?
Okay, so if the parents are saying, please don't talk to my child about it, I am wondering if there's instructions in the bishop handbook that has something to do with that, because as a bishop you've got to honor the parents and their right, I would think, to do that. If it's a young adult, if it's a youth, the last thing we want is for a bishop to have any kind of accusations brought against him. And as bishops, my empathy and my heart is with you, because there is a fine line, and that can get really frightening. I'm certain as a bishop it can feel like that could be a really fine line. If the parents are saying, you may not have this conversation with my child, then unfortunately, you will have to give that child to God. If they are struggling, you're going to have to give it to God, because to disrespect a parent in that regard, I would think could bring legal action and other scary things. Now, if a child comes to you and the parent has said, you can't have this conversation with my child, bishops, what do you do with that? If the child comes and they confess, then I feel like you know what you need to do in that circumstance. And I don't feel comfortable giving that counsel since I'm not a bishop, and that one could be really tricky. Okay. Thank you for asking that. Any other follow-up? Yes, here and then here.
I was just gonna say, I really appreciate that you were specific on how to ask the young women, or just any female that you're serving, how to ask about things. But something I've noticed, I've worked in young women's for about 12 years. And I have noticed there's a learning curve, even just knowing what it means when someone says, are you keeping the law of chastity? Or are you morally clean? And I think so.
Thank you for bringing that up.
You know, they're like, yes. And I think it's because they're like, I'm not even sure what you're talking about, but I'll say yes, like the little beehives.
Yeah.
But if you say, you know, the way you ask it, if you say it like you said it earlier, then they're like, oh, I get what you're talking about. But just thinking that you say it like the For Strength of Youth says it might not quite do the trick.
Yeah, it absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. So many girls are like, what is the chastity? And we're like, are you kidding? You've been hearing this your whole life. You're LD, you know what the law of chastity is. They do not know. They do not know that maybe saying I want to get down and talking about that stuff is breaking the law of chastity. They have no idea. So being really explicit, not using the morally clean and the law of chastity, it's too easy. It's too easy for a young woman to nod her head and be like, mm-hmm, you bet. For sure I'm doing that. Yeah. Without knowing the realm of what it means. I encourage bishops to have frank conversations and use Fifth Sundays with youth and to bring them together and talk about exactly what the law of chastity means. And that is letting the parents know we're going to have this conversation with our youth, okay? And here's how we're going to present it to them, and the kids know. You will have kids, Bishop, who will say, oh my goodness, I didn't know that I was breaking the law of chastity. When you break it down for them and you tell them exactly what that entails, they will not even know that they are doing it. Morally clean. Kids look at morally clean. I'm not having sex. That includes oral sex. I'm not having sex. Many kids don't understand that oral sex is sex. Okay? So breaking it down for them. I'm sure it feels like as an ecclesiastical leader, that's not my responsibility, it's the parents' responsibility. What I'm finding is that these kids need that bridge to Christ. And if they're not recognizing it through their homes, what they're doing wrong, that if we can provide that bridge for them and teach them, that they will come to Him, and that their adult years can be filled with so much joy and happiness, instead of discovering this as an adult when they're in a marriage, that, oh my goodness, these things are not okay. All right? Really, really critical. Thank you. Good question. Yes?
We have two from the people on Zoom. The suggestion was made that this subject might be appropriate for a Fifth Sunday lesson. I would suggest that perhaps it may be just as appropriate to notify the parents in a one-on-one situation. What are your thoughts about a large group versus one-on-one?
I think it would be great to notify the parents in a one-on-one situation. If you have the time to meet with each parent individually in a one-on-one situation. If a parent is like, oh, I'm not sure I want this to happen, I would definitely ask to meet with that parent in a one-on-one situation, because they need some education. So that's a very good question. Fifth
Mindy?
Sunday is just a bigger group.
Just to follow, what if you have a youth in your office as a bishop and you haven't had a chance to talk to the parents? You don't know how they feel one way or the other. How do you address that young woman? Do you ask those specific detailed questions?
I would, if the bishop feels so inspired, he needs to follow what his
Okay.
inspiration tells him to do. I think it's okay. I'm talking about a best case scenario. I'm painting like this best case scenario. Oh my goodness, wouldn't that be nice if we could have it perfect like that? But it won't be like that every single time.
Okay.
So yeah, and if the bishop does feel that feeling like I need to hold back, then it's important that you do, and even and follow up later if there's any question about it. I want to protect the safety of the bishop, and I also want to make sure that these young women and women have a chance to come to Christ and be healed and made clean from what they're dealing with.
Good. Thank you.